The night was heavy with dust and silence. The kind of silence that clings to your skin like sweat and whispers of things unsaid. And he found himself standing at the door of a place he had sworn never to enter. A place where men came to buy not love but distraction, not companionship but silence. And there she was, thin, broken, a woman whose eyes seemed carved from stone, yet burned with an unquenchable fire. And when she looked at him for the first time, he thought she would turn away, but instead, with a voice that carried both venom and sorrow, she whispered, "You paid for me. Now finish it." The words struck him harder than any fist he had ever taken, and for a man who had fought wars, buried brothers, and carried guilt in his chest like lead, it was strange that this frail, battered figure could disarm him so completely. But as the lantern light revealed the bruises along her arms, the cuts not yet healed, and the strange way she seemed to shrink into herself, he realized there was nothing here to finish. There was only something to face. He sat in silence and she stared at him, as though daring him to prove he was no different from the others, who had left her body with scars and her spirit with shadows. And for a long while he said nothing, because what words could answer that kind of pain? She leaned closer, her breath ragged, and in her eyes he saw more than exhaustion. He saw a story, one carved into her flesh, like a cruel scripture, and against his own will. He asked softly, "Who did this to you?" At first she laughed, a hollow, bitter laugh that sounded like glass breaking, and then her face twisted into rage. "Men like you," she said. "Men who think pain gives them the right to finish me, to own me, to erase me piece by piece." He should have walked away then. He should have left her in that room of broken dreams, but something in her voice chained him to the floor. Something in her trembling hands reminded him of the sister he had lost to raiders, the sister he had never been able to save. And for the first time in years, he felt shame strong enough to drown him. He told her he would not touch her, that he would not finish what he had paid for, and in her eyes flickered a moment of confusion, as though she had long forgotten what it felt like to be denied violation. But then she whispered something that shattered him even more. "If you don't finish me, they will. They always will. You cannot save me. You cannot save anyone." Her words were not meant to wound him, yet they did, because they struck the one wound he had hidden beneath his silence. The wound of failing to save those he once loved, and in that moment, he made a decision not born of lust, not of pity, but of a strange, burning vow that felt like destiny. He rose, not to leave, but to stand between her and the world that had broken her, and though she cursed him, clawed at him, demanded he let her rot in the cage she had been given, he lifted her frail body from the bed, wrapped her in the blanket she clutched like armor, and carried her through the shadows of the brothel. The night air struck them cold, but the cold was freedom, and as the desert winds brushed against her battered skin, she stopped fighting for the first time, staring at him with an expression he could not read. Was it fear, disbelief, or the first fragile spark of trust? They rode through the desert, the horses' hooves striking the earth like drums of war, and though every mile was filled with the threat of pursuit, he did not waver, for he had chosen not only to carry her body but to carry her truth. And as the horizon bled with dawn, she told him the secret that shattered him completely. She had once been the daughter of a preacher in his hometown, a girl who had sung hymns beside him in church, a girl who had smiled at him when life was still innocent. Before war had hardened him and cruelty had stolen her, he remembered her name then. Remembered the sound of her laughter as children ran through fields. Remembered that he had once promised, in the foolishness of youth, that he would always protect her. And now here she was, broken by the world he had abandoned her to, scarred by the sins of men he had once fought beside, and his heart caved under the weight of it. She was no stranger. She was a ghost of his past dragged through hell, and now thrust back into his arms as if fate demanded he face the promises he had failed to keep. Tears burned in his eyes, but he did not let them fall, for she had no need for his pity. She needed his strength, his resolve, his willingness to fight not only for her survival, but for her healing. And so he vowed beneath the rising sun that he would not simply save her life, but fight until she remembered her worth. Fight until the scars no longer defined her. Fight until the words "you paid for me" no longer meant chains, but sacrifice, redemption, and freedom. And that vow would change them both. Because what he found underneath her bruises was not just pain, it was resilience. It was fire. It was the reflection of everything he had lost in himself. And in saving her, he began to save himself.